There's one thing I should like to say, and I might as well say it at once. It is this. In what we have done, and whatever you may think of it, we have been perfectly disinterested.
Yeah.
We are not getting anything out of this. We have much more to lose than to gain. We are 4 plain Englishmen who put our country first. I dare say that we didn't make a very good impression when we came in just now. The fact is that we knew we'd taken on a pretty stiff job. I'll only speak for myself, but I had drunk a good deal. I'm not a drinking man ordinarily, to brace myself up for it. When you come to the point, it does go against the grain to kill an archbishop, especially when you've been brought up in good church traditions. So if we seemed a bit rowdy, you will understand why it was, and for my part I'm awfully sorry about it. We realized this was our duty, but all the same we had to work ourselves up to it. And, as I said, we are not getting a penny out of this. We know perfectly well how things will turn out. King Henry, God bless him, will have to say, for reasons of state, that he never meant this to happen, and there's going to be an awful row, and at the best we shall have to spend the rest of our lives abroad. And even when reasonable people come to see that the Archbishop had to be put out of the way, and personally I had a tremendous admiration for him, you must have noticed what a good show he put up at the end. They won't give us any glory. No, we have done for ourselves. There's no mistake about that. So, as I said at the beginning, please give us at least the credit for being completely disinterested in this business. I think that's about all I have to say.
I think we will all agree that William de Tracy has spoken well and has made a very important point. The gist of his argument is this, that we have been completely disinterested, but our act itself needs more justification than that, and you must hear our other speakers. I shall next call upon Hugh de Morville, who has made a special study of statecraft and constitutional law. Sir Hugh de Morville.
I should like first to recur to a point that was very well put by our leader, Reginald Fitzurse, that you are Englishmen, and therefore your sympathies are always with the underdog. It is the English spirit of fair play. Now, the worthy Archbishop, whose good qualities I very much admired, has throughout been presented as the underdog. But is this really the case? I am going to appeal not to your emotions, but to your reason. You are hard-headed, sensible people, as I can see, and not to be taken in by emotional claptrap. I therefore ask you to consider soberly what were the Archbishop's aims and what are King Henry's aims. In the answer to these questions lies the key to the problem. The King's aim has been perfectly consistent. During the reign of the late Queen Matilda and the eruption of the unhappy usurper Stephen, the kingdom was very much divided. Our king saw that the one thing needful was to restore order, to curb the excessive powers of local government, which were usually exercised for selfish and often for seditious ends, and to reform the legal system. He therefore intended that Becket, who had proved himself an extremely able administrator, no one denies that, should unite the offices of Chancellor and Archbishop. Had Becket concurred with the King's wishes, we should have had an almost ideal state, a union of spiritual and temporal administration under the central government. I knew Becket well, in various official relations, and I may say that I have never known a man so well qualified for the highest rank of the civil service. And what happened? The moment that Becket, at the King's instance, had been made Archbishop, he resigned the office of Chancellor. He became more priestly than the priests. He ostentatiously and offensively adopted an ascetic manner of life. He affirmed immediately that there was a higher order than that which our king, and he as the king's servant, had for so many years striven to establish, and that, God knows why, the two orders were incompatible. You will agree with me that such interference by an archbishop offends the instincts of a people like ours. So far, I know that I have your approval. I read it in your faces. It is only with the measures we have had to adopt in order to set matters to rights that you take issue. No one regrets the necessity for violence more than we do. Unhappily, there are times when violence is the only way in which social justice can be secured. At another time, you would condemn an archbishop by vote of parliament and execute him formally as a traitor, and no one would have to bear the burden of being called murderer. And at a later time still, even such temperate measures as these would become unnecessary. But if you have now arrived at a just subordination of the pretensions of the Church to the welfare of the state, remember that it is we who took the first step. We have been instrumental in bringing about the state of affairs that you approve. We have served your interests. We merit your applause. And if there is any guilt whatever in the matter, you must share it with us.
Morville has given us a great deal to think about. It seems to me that he has said almost the last word for those who have been able to follow his very subtle reasoning. We have, however, one more speaker who has, I think, another point of view to express. If there are any who are still unconvinced, I think that Richard Brito, coming as he does of a family distinguished for its loyalty to the Church, will be able to convince them. Richard Brito.
The speakers who have preceded me, to say nothing of our leader, Reginald Fitzurse, have all spoken very much to the point. I have nothing to add along their particular lines of argument. What I have to say may be put in form of a question. Who killed the Archbishop? As you have been eyewitnesses of this lamentable scene, you may feel some surprise at my putting it in this way. But consider the course of events. I am obliged very briefly to go over the ground traversed by the last speaker. While the late Archbishop was Chancellor, no one under the King did more to weld the country together, to give it the unity, the stability, order, tranquility, and justice that it so badly needed. From the moment he became Archbishop, he completely reversed his policy. He showed himself to be utterly indifferent to the fate of the country, to be, in fact, a monster of egotism. This egotism grew upon him until it became at last an undoubted mania. I have unimpeachable evidence to the effect that before he left France he clearly prophesied, in the presence of numerous witnesses, that he had not long to live, and that he would be killed in England. He used every means of provocation. From his conduct, step by step, there can be no inference except that he had determined upon a death by martyrdom. Even at the last he could have given us reason. You have seen how he evaded our questions.